What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. So today we'll do a bit of a little random Q&A, and yeah, so if you guys got questions, let me know as we go. I did post it in the chat, so I'll pull a bunch from there. Looks like Sam just asked one. What is going on, Sylvester, Sam, Harkins, Dustin? Hopefully you guys are doing wonderful on this lovely Wednesday afternoon. Sam is asking, give me some pH raising tips besides CO2 scrubber, please. Okay, now one of the easiest ways to get the initial impact is one, open your windows in your house. If you have lots of people breathing in there, there's going to be a higher CO2 concentration in the air, which means you're going to have a lower pH. Now, if you're somewhere where you can open your windows for a day and use that as a bit of a test, and if you see your pH go up, then you know you have a CO2 issue to deal with. So one of the easiest things that you can do there is pull outside air to your skimmer. If you can't leave your windows open all the time, if you can run like a 1/2-inch hose from your skimmer, if you're near an outside wall, or poke it through a window. In my case, I ran it up to my attic. But if you can get that fresh air in, that will help bring in fresh air into your tank and help drive out more CO2. So that definitely will make an improvement. What's going on, Reggie? Other few things you can do is get a fairly intense refugium light and running it reverse to your tank lights. That way photosynthesis is happening, 24 hours a day. So if you do that, it is also going to help drive it up, right? So it's going to help reduce your low at night. Other pH things you can do, again, like some people dose alkalinity at night. Dripping kalkwasser is also a good one. Like my frag tank stays pretty high, mainly from dripping calc 24/7. What's going on, Jay Woo? Now, there was actually another question that was in the chat in the Facebook group. Someone asked about pH. Okay, there's a good one from Nino. Is chasing pH worth it? Some say yes, some say no. I don't think it's worth chasing it specifically, but it's worth raising it if it's too low. Reggie, what's up, Devin from Houston? Thank you, sir, for the $10 super chat. Much appreciated. Mighty kind. So if your pH is, I'm going to say, below 7.9, so if it's 7.8-ish or lower, you are inhibiting coral growth. I mean, stuff will still grow, but it's going to be slower. So making an effort to up your pH to be closer to 8 is going to give you better growth in your tank. So if your tank's full of coral and it's too much work because it grows too much, you probably don't care. But if you have a new tank, little frags, you want to grow. I wouldn't recommend using buffers to do it because those are kind of a short-term temporary fix. It's better to do something like adding, fresh air to your skimmer, or if you're dripping kelp, but something that will kind of work on it 24/7. Now there is the Brightwell pH up or pH boost pH. I do have a bottle. I'm gonna start trying that. That is a buffer, but that one is a hydroxide based, which works by kind of binding the carbonates in the water and helping pull them out, which will in turn increase the availability. So that one actually does have potential. So that one I'm going to experiment with in the near future. What happens if you pop the bubbles on a bounce mushroom? I don't know, and I wouldn't want to hurt my poor mushroom, so I will not find out of that one. Basement tanks are the worst for pH. Yeah, when I had mine in the basement, I did the same thing. I ran just a little 1/4-inch airline outside, and it wasn't like a massive difference, but it definitely made a difference on it. Thai Reef, what's the best HANA check for phosphates? I just have the standard one. I don't believe I have the ultra low one, but honestly they both work. They both do the job. Kind of depends on what tank range you're in. If you're at that low end, go for the ultra low range, but if you're at like the normal ranges, get the normal one. Buffers also have a lot of boron in them. Yeah, I wouldn't want to use an alkalinity-based buffer. Like, those are the ones I would avoid, because that's going to wreak havoc with your alkalinity going up and down. The hydroxide-based ones have a lot more potential, just because that pulls the CO2 out of the water in a sense, so that definitely works. Rob, 3/8 light out. Perfect. What's going on, Farm Frags? Watch your pH if you go on vacation because it skyrockets. Yeah, exactly, right? If there's no one in the house, there's no one breathing, it's a lot more room for it to just grow up and up and up. What's going on, John Vermont? Great stream Saturday with me, Reef. Just saw the entire stream today at work. Awesome. That was a marathon too. That was a good 4 hours of streaming. I expected 2, and it was 4, so it was good. Mini marathon with Mark. We got to make up for lost time. Skimmer goes crazy when I feed my fish. So when I feed my tank, I turn off the skimmer and the return pump for 45 minutes. And I partially do that because I don't want food going down the overflow into, your socks or your filter roller. If it stays in the tank, there's more time for a fish or coral, something to grab it and eat it. And then generally leaving your skimmer off a little while gives it that kind of buffer time for things to restabilize, especially if you have something like mysis in there. So I would definitely recommend going that way and leaving your skimmer off for a bit. John Reef for Vermont, thank you for everything you do. Thank you very much, John. Much appreciated. So yeah, I would definitely leave my skimmer off when you do feed mode. I also a big fan of turning off the return pump as well for a while. Do you dose milk in your tank? I have never heard of that. What's going on, Galgo? Okay, chats. Okay, Reggie was asking, would be about upgrading tanks, thinking about going from a 120 to a 230, which is a solid upgrade. Adding more rock, and of course, water while keeping corals and fish happy. So, the one benefit, if you're going to a bigger tank and you're using all of your rock, your coral, your rock, your fish, everything's already has that established bioload on that current rock. Now, if you have a sand bed, I would recommend using new sand. You can clean it, but when you clean it, you're going to kill all your good bacteria on it during the cleaning process. So that is one big destabilizer. So what I've always done in the past is when I upgraded tanks, I did use bottle bacteria as well as kind of a safety buffer. So you're going to have, half or more of your bacteria, a good chunk of it on your rock. So you're not fully starting from scratch. But like when I upgraded my tank, I pre-cycled my rock, and then I also dumped in a bunch of Quickstart XLM at the same time. So I used all that bacteria to kind of pre-seed the rock, and then two, once I moved the tank, it was that denitrifying bacteria that kind of added that buffer zone, right? Just to handle any bit of extra bioload or anything that would happen from not moving the sand bed. So that's kind of how I would go about that one. But yeah, as long as you got no big pests in your tank, I'd just reuse all your rock. You can add more rock into it. Again, it never hurts to pre-cycle your rock. That's just going to put you ahead of the game and less potential issues of any of the funky stages coming down the road. Does humidity in the room affect pH? I don't know. I suspect there is some correlation. I don't know how much there is, though. James. Hey, Devin, can you explain dosing elk when you would want to do it? I do mine after hours so the pH doesn't drop as much. Is this a good idea? So it depends on what your demand is. There's lots of people that will dose, say, calcium in the day and alkalinity at night, and mainly for that little pH boost. I've always just dripped it 24/7, like to space it up just to keep things stable. If you have, test your tank, wait 24 hours, test again. If it's stable, that's a good sign, right? But it depends how much of a swing you have. If you only have a little bit of a swing, then just dosing at night is probably fine. If it is, a massive swing between day and night, then I'd want to do it all day and be more consistent. So that's, I'm going to say it kind of depends. So check your swing and see on that one. Lawrence, hey mate, I've added ATM calling to the new aquarium. How long should I wait before I add my skimmer? Do I even need to start with one? Don't even worry about adding your skimmer right away, especially when you're first cycling, because you don't really want to pull out all the bacteria that you just added to the tank. Once you start adding a bunch of fish and have a bioload, then I'd worry about the skimmer. But if you have a decent sized tank, there's not really a bioload in it, you don't need to worry about the skimmer quite yet. Our sellers, can we talk about adding fish after a fallow period? So fallow period, fishless period, basically, usually someone has ick or something, they're trying to rid it. It's roughly, I believe it's 76 days that you want to leave your tank fishless to make sure that the little parasites die off. Now, the biggest thing is make sure you fully wait that period. If you add fish ahead of time, you have the risk of little torments or the little things in the tank reattaching to a fish and restarting the cycle all over again. So again, with anything, I would go a bit slower when you add stuff back in, because you likely lost a chunk of your bacteria, especially if there's no fish in the tank, right? So again, I'd go slower with adding it, or you could do what I would do done in the past, is where you add a little bit of ammonia to the tank, and that's going to help feed the bacteria and keep your culture still strong. Yeah, Rob, I would dose elk as flat as possible. Do not chase pH. Yeah, so don't chase pH, but if it's really low, then it's worth upping your whole kind of baseline of pH. 6 weeks without fish, heavy ghost feeding. Yeah, exactly. Then add 25, add back 25 fish. 25 fish is a lot. But yeah, you could ghost feed it, or I personally would just use pure ammonia because that's basically what ghost feeding turns into, but without all the nitrates and phosphates. It's about 0.5 DKH. 0.5 isn't terrible. The other thing you could try doing, James, with that, assuming you have a doser, you know, say you're dosing 50 mil a day, right? And you're doing it all at nighttime. Maybe dose like 20 mil in the day and 30 mil at night or something, right? Like do something to minimize that swing a little bit. That's kind of what I would probably do. Then you can get a little more of a boost at night, but then you're minimizing the day swing. So if you have a doser and you have that ability to program the individual doses, you know, every hour, half an hour, that might be a good way to go. OC Aquarius, the colors of my coral are fine, but need my red Monty paint is pale. The Monty pores and the other colors are fine, only the red. Red Monty is a very fast grower. That one usually grows actually really quick. It's probably too much light if it's pale in general. There could be other things, but in general, it can bleach out if you're putting too much light at it. So if it's not attached to a rock, see if you can move it lower and see how the colors do after that. Do you know if Vibrant, Microbacter Clean, Microbacter 7 differ? They sure do differ. Have you any effects of negative of using them long term? I've only used Vibrant once, and that was to get rid of bubble algae in my nano tank, and that did work well. It took about 6 weeks to work. Microbacter Clean, I did use some of that after I cycled my tank to kind of prevent the ugly stage, and it did a pretty good job. It definitely minimized it. Microbacter 7. So Microbacter 7 is 7 different strains of bacteria, and a lot of people will dose it weekly as kind of partner maintenance to their system. It's a good way to kind of like boost the bacteria, the good beneficial bacteria in your tank. I don't see any harm in using them together from personal experience. I haven't used all three. I've used Microbacter Clean and Microbacter 7 together as a combination, but I haven't used Vibrant with them. So either way, I think you should be good there. I mean, it's always best to stick to one brand. So if you're not, try the Clean and the 7 because they're same company. They're more made to work together, and then you'll likely be more successful that way. So that's what I would do personally. Coral loss with Vibrant. I haven't personally lost any corals or had any issue when I did use Vibrant the one time. Now it is kind of like a carbon dosing in a way, so if you overdo it, I mean, you would run a risk there. So again, go slow with most things. Reef C forever. I dose Microbacter 7 weekly. Tons of people do, and I'm actually going to start trying to do that because I still have not a ton. It's getting better. I've been just randomly dosing it, but I do have some weird, funky bacteria, not even algae, some bacteria thing in my frag tank that's I've been slowly trying to rid. Okay, what else we got here? Jeff, where do I get alerts for the Facebook live stream? Facebook, YouTube, this is in the group. So it is on YouTube. I do them at the exact same time every week, so it's pretty easy if you can remember it. So 4 o'clock Pacific or 7 Eastern, something else in the middle of the country, but that is every Wednesday, so pretty consistent. But yeah, if you are subscribed, hit the little bell thing, and then most of the time you get notifications. YouTube's kind of questionable on if you get it all the time, but hit the little bell and you should get notified for future live streams. Owen, is there anything wrong with doing a couple 50% water changes, being battling phosphates, and the tank doesn't like lithium chloride? Probably dosing too much. Too much is trouble, actually, and burns through Rofrost GFO. The only thing, if you're going to do a 50% water change, make sure the elk that you're doing is similar to your tank. If you keep your elk at 11 and you do water change with an elk of 7 salt, that's going to cause a big swing and it's going to piss off all your corals. Where if you have, so if you're, keep your tank at say 8 and the salt you're using is 8.5, 8, somewhere in that range, then you're fine, right? So I would always advise picking a salt that is similar range in L to your tank, because that's the biggest thing. So just make sure it's similar, and then you'll be fine to do a couple big water changes to knock it down. No problem. Brandon, auto aqua auto water change on Office Nanos. So that guy is actually, my buddy has one that we put on his tank, and that is okay. So the auto aqua one, this guy, let me give it bigger. So this is like a little auto water changer and an auto top off in one. Kind of cool device. So if you saw my buddy Dylan's tank that had like the floating tank on the wall, he has one of these on there. And he uses it for like a daily auto water change as well as the auto top off. I know he uses it, and I think I know one other person that uses it. Both of them has worked well for. I haven't really heard any issues. So, I mean, I have the Auto Aqua, like the little skimmer security, and a couple other devices from them, and they've all been solid for me. So, overall, I would say, yep, it works pretty well in my experience. Butterfly in the main display. Yes, there is. In the past, I've had pyramid butterflies, super cool fish. Currently, I have the copper band in there, which I moved in a few days ago. So I was a little bit hesitant at first, so I did pick up one, and he lived in my frag tank for about 2 months. And after 2 months of not nipping any coral, I felt fairly confident adding him to the main tank. So that made me happy. And yeah, so far no nipping coral. I don't know if he's eating any Aptasia, which would be nice, but so far not eating coral, which is a good sign. Either way, they're gorgeous fish. I love them, so pretty stoked he's finally in there. Heath, it looks like I have some sort of brown algae growing on a couple of corals. Is it bad? If so, how do I handle the issue? It depends what it is, and that is a little bit of a tricky part, is trying to get a good photo. If you take a photo, post it to the Reef Facebook group later, and I'll take a look and see if we can figure out what it is. Now, if it's growing on coral, it's probably on like a dead chunk of an acro or a plate or something. So usually if it's healthy tissue, you're not gonna have algae on it. If a part dies off, then those little white tips are more prone to have algae or something growing on it. So it could be a bacteria. If it's fuzzy, it's probably an algae. If it's kind of like gobbiness, it's probably a bacteria. So it kind of depends what it is. But generally, just water change hose, suck it out, or break that little piece off of the coral that's probably dead anyways, and then there's less chance of it growing there. What schedule do you run on your lights? AB plus. Okay, so I have my own custom version of AB plus, and I actually did post it on my website a while back, but I will post it up, or I'll see if I can pull it up. Give me 2 secs. Let's make this work. See if I can screen share it. Screen. Okay, so. Alright, so my light schedule is a custom one that I did in Mobius, and it was kind of based off the general AB plus one, and I added a more intense period for about 4 hours of the day. So if we look at it, if we hit like these points over here, like the flat parts, that is more of an AB plus schedule. In the middle, that doesn't play it nice that way. So in the middle, what I did is I took everything boosted up, and I boosted the whites. So I have the cool whites, the warm whites 50%, reds and greens at 30%. And that's kind of my high point in the day. And that's kind of like the cooking it period, the more intense, trying to get more colors out of the coral. And then the rest of the day, it's, 100, red, green, whites are all at 20%. So it's not quite AB plus, but it's very similar to that. So that is what? That is 4, 11, 15 to 2. Yeah, so about 4 hours-ish of the day, and that my overall schedule is about 12 hours plus ramp down. And I found this actually has been working really well. I did post this. If you go to reefdudes.com and just search for like Mobius or G5 schedule, something like that, it will show up there. And yeah, for me, it's worked really well, and I know a few other people that have been using my schedule and they've been happy with it. So yeah, give it a try, but it works well. And How many fish do you have in your tank? And is this the 200 gallon? Yes, this is the 200 gallon. This is the water box 7225, so it's 72 long, 25 wide, 24 tall. So it's like 190, 200 gallons ish display plus sump, all that jazz. So, and I have lots of fish in there, lots. Are you using Neomarine? Yes, I am. Yeah, so I use Brightwell Neomarine salt in my tank. It is a happier range to where I keep my elk in my tank, and it also mixes very clean, and it doesn't get all like the gunk in my mixing bins, which is a huge plus for me because they are a pain to clean. In the past, like I used to use Instant Ocean and then Reef crystals, which work perfectly fine. However, the elk was a little all over the place, and the other thing was there has some brown gunk in your mixing bins after time, which was really annoying to clean. So I've been using Neomarine since I did the water box, and it's kept my bins super duper clean, which has been awesome. But yeah, the biggest thing is pick a salt that's similar to where you keep your elk. That's one of the biggest things that I advise. That way, if you ever have to do a big emergency water change, you don't have to worry about buffering or changing it. You can just do one, and then everything will be happy. But yeah, if you're doing mixing bins and stuff, you know, it's worth getting a clean salt that saves you that maintenance. You know, you don't have all that brown crud and who knows what else inside of there long term. What's going on, Tucker? Yeah, Avelino, I have no idea how many fish I have in there. I have a lot. I do have a slight nutrient battle because I have so many fish, which is a little bit of a challenge. I have 3 yellow tangs, a purple tang, a hippo tang, a sailfin tang. So there's, what, 6 tangs right there. 3 or 4 wrasses, a couple ansias, hawkfish, bangai cardinal, copper band butterfly is the most recent one, azure damsel, what do we got there? I can see him right there, royal gamma, probably a bunch more I'm not thinking of. Hawkfish, he's super cool. So a bunch of little creatures. So I definitely have a lot of fish in there, but it works out pretty well. David Brooks, hello from Edmonton. Hello, fellow Canadian. Brett, I was going to say post to the AI Facebook group and then remember using Rayon. I have posted my AI schedule in the past, so that's probably on my website too. I should actually start posting to there more, but I do have some in there. Would you end up naming the butterfly? I don't know. I haven't actually named it yet, but there's tons of good suggestions from the post. So I posted it to YouTube story community tab as well as the Instagram, and there's tons of good suggestions. So I don't know. I'll probably pick one of them. It's still on the to-do list. What's going on, Scott? Fluconazole will kill my macroalgae. Probably. I would, if you're worried about losing your Chaeto, I would pull it out and throw in a 5-gallon bucket while you're using fluconazole. Fluconazole does a wonder on hair algae and different things, and it works quite well for that, and perhaps this is the main one. Reefing with I use a version of your schedule. Awesome. How are you liking it? How do you like it, Seymour? What Reef webcam do you recommend? I actually don't have a Reef webcam. The clip behind me I took about an hour ago, and I just put my Sony DSLR up by the tank and just recorded for like 10 minutes, and I do that every like few weeks or months just to mix it up and get a different background. So it's not live, but it's like an hour ago, so it's as close as we get. But then at least I don't have to worry about people walking in front of it and everything else as it's on, and cords running across my house. Another question popped up in my head about top-off RODI water. How much do your systems need per week of fresh water? Mine seems like it's taken a lot of water. Yes. So 2 things that matter. One is how much surface area do you have? Okay, so how much surface area, how much turbulence, I guess, or surface tension with the water, and also how hot's like kind of your water, the tank, what's the humidity in your room. There's a lot of things that play into evaporation. So there isn't really just like one easy answer to it. The more surface area you have, the more you're going to evaporate. The drier your room is, the more you're going to evaporate. The bigger the temperature differential, like if your tank is really hot, it'll evaporate more. If you're in your tank cooler, it'll evaporate less, right? You have a lid, it'll evaporate less. You don't have a lid, it evaporates more. But as a general way to look at it, like the more surface area, the more it's going to evaporate. Now, in my frag tank is 6.5, 7 feet long by 28, which is a lot of surface area. And I have a 10-gallon ATO, and that gets refilled every 3 days, so it gives you an idea. So it's probably, what, 3 gallons a day-ish? My water box tank, I honestly have no idea how much it evaporates. I have a 40-gallon bin that's my ATO, and it auto-fills itself if it gets low, so I don't even know what it evaporates, but I'm going to guess probably 4 or 5 gallons. I don't know, a couple gallons anyway, so it's quite a bit. It might be less, but yeah, I couldn't tell you offhand. Hello from MS. I don't know what that is, but hello. Give some likes, guys. Thanks, James. If you guys enjoy it, hit that like button. Makes the YouTube algorithm nice and happy. Always appreciate it. Someone tell me if he's using a CO2 scrubber. Why, yes, I am. I have it on one of my 2 tanks. So with that, one of my videos I did, I don't know, I think it was around Christmas-ish. I used these clear vacuum tubes, which are about 2.5 inches by 3 feet, and I have 3 of those up in my attic. So it is like these super big beefy tubes, and I went crazy overkill because it's my attic. I don't really want to crawl up there and change it every week, so I went nice and big and overkill. And that is helping. Now, it's not crazy big. It was a decent improvement, but I realized after the fact that I was using expired media, so it's not as good as it could be. So one of these days I'm going to have to splurge and get some more not out-of-date media. Once I run out, I'll try it and see how much of a difference it makes, but it definitely had a nice impact on the tank. Tony closed UK Reef. Dev, how long would you keep a coral frag in observation which contains fish and coral before putting the main display? In theory, it would probably be wise to leave them in there for about a month or so. I mean, you could probably get away with less. But, Rob, happy Nutty Fudge Day. Thank you, sir. Happy Nutty Fudge Day to you as well. Yeah, 30 days or a couple weeks would probably be a good way of doing it. The biggest things I want to look out for is flatworms. Would probably be the most common one I want to watch out for. More prevalent on, acros, obviously. They do have some that are on LPS and mushrooms. So that would be the biggest one I would want to do. Observation, you can watch it. And if there is something, you can treat and deal with it. Now, it is almost wise to just watch stuff rather than dipping it, because dipping does add stress to the coral. There is certain dips that are less harsh, and it kind of depends on the type of coral to an extent. I don't have a coral quarantine tank. I've thought about it for ages, which one of these days I may have to do it. But I would probably 3-4 weeks and just watch it. The other big thing is, too, if there is eggs or something on there, it might take a couple weeks for it to hatch. So that's kind of the one big thing, right? There may not be a flatworm, but what if there's eggs on it, right? And then eventually they'll hatch. And if you start seeing little patches or bite marks, and that's kind of the stuff you want to watch out for. Matt Gear, should I give up using amino acids? Seems like no matter which brand, I always end up with a cyano outbreak. I would not necessarily give up, but I would lower your dosage. You're probably dosing too much of it if you're getting a cyano outbreak. Now, I have the Coral Restore one on a doser that I dose like 2 or 3 mils a day. That's it. I do have a buddy that when he had his tank running, he would dose like 15 mils a day of acro power, and he swore by it. Basically just like he said, after not dosing for a week or 2, he would see like far better colors. So you don't have to dose it, but there is some benefit to dosing it. Whether that value is there is kind of your choice, but if you're getting cyano, I would just say you're probably dosing too much, so lower your dosage and you'll probably be okay. Sandbed. Okay, Steve, sandbed maintenance, to vacuum or not to vacuum? So that is partially going to depend on how deep your sandbed is. If you have a really deep sandbed, most people advise not touching them. I've never had one more than, say, 3 inches. I've never had like a deep one. I've had kind of like the borderline deep, like just questionably calling it deep. I do think it's wise to vacuum them once in a while. Since I do auto water changes, I've only vacuumed mine like twice in the last year. I mean, realistically, I should be doing it more than I am. Now, with that consideration is you don't want to disturb too much of your sound bed at any one point in time. So if, in your tank, maybe only do like 20% at a time, or a quarter of it max, right? That way, do a quarter of it, maybe a month later, do another quarter of it, and just slowly do different chunks of it over time. The other thing is, too, if you have little creatures that clean your sand bed, it's probably not as big of a deal. But over time, there's going to be like, fish poop and detritus and stuff that will build up in your sand bed. So if you have like Nasarius snails, sand sifting stars, like conches, all those guys are really good for stirring it up and helping clean it. So yeah, that'd be my biggest advice. Like, do it periodically. I wouldn't never do it unless you have a super deep one. Then I would probably leave it alone. Interesting you mentioned that. I just started. All of a sudden I got cyano going on when I never had it before. Yeah, no, totally just lower your dosage of amino acids and you're probably okay. Juice, any advice on spacing 3R XR15s on a 36-inch acro tank? Now, if you watch the BRS videos, they had the best spread, having them slightly closer to the outsides and using the reflection back because the middle kind of has a cross section. Personally, I would honestly just like space them evenly because my OCD just likes it all nice and even and symmetrical, and it's fine. I have mine basically symmetrical on my tank, and it's pretty much even par straight across the tank. In the past, I had 2 XR15s on a 33-foot tank, and it did the job. So 3, you're gonna have tons of light. So I don't think you're gonna have any issue really. Like honestly, just one in the center, and the other 2 can be slightly closer to the edges, and I think you'll be set. Tony Klaus UK Reef. Is there any coral that should not be dipped? The biggest ones I've found issues with is smooth skin acros. So you have your deep water acros. Basically anything with a smooth skin, either give it a very quick dip or just avoid dipping it. I found they almost never fare well when I've dipped them. So those are the ones I would want to avoid. What's going on, Kevin? Would a low 1260 meg level be the reason for biopsis for hair algae or fuzz on my live rock when phosphates nitrates are nearly 0? I wouldn't blame magnesium for it. There was many claims back in the day of elevated magnesium getting rid of bryopsis. Bryopsis is just a bugger. Like if it gets in there, it doesn't seem to be overly picky on conditions. Just once it gets in, it's a bit of a bugger to get rid of it. If it's hair algae, I would manually remove it and then use a little bit of hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, 3%, and then just do a little like spot treating with your flow off. And I find that will kill it pretty easy. It has never been a big issue that way getting rid of it. If it is bryopsis, you can try something similar, but if it's persistent, it's probably worth just getting fluconazole, and this seems to be the magic bullet for it. James, what is your opinion on Neptune dose pump? Do you like it better than like the Red Sea or Ecotech? Neptune is so much bigger. Do you think it will last longer, maybe larger motors? I have had 3 different doses over time. They definitely they work well. If you have an Apex, it does integrate nicely. If you're using it for dosing, I think it's a solid option. If you're using it for auto water changes or a calcium reactor, then I find it a little loud for continuous duty type of use. Well, you can't really run it continuous, but you can oscillate it on and off and do other ways around it. So if dosing and you have an Apex, it's a solid option. My favorite pump is the doses, which I know they're hard to get. Hopefully they're coming more soon, but just because they're quiet and they're super duper precise, which I like. So I use them for auto water changes, I use them for calcium reactor, and for dosing like trace elements, minute amounts. So I do like them that one. But either one will do it. Oh, the other big benefit I like is they're standalone, so you don't need the controller, or something happens to the controller, your dosing still works. So food for thought. The new Red Sea one, I haven't actually seen it in person or used it yet. It's just released, so I can't really comment on that one yet, but it looks fairly solid from the little bits I've seen of it so far. Getting a Red Sea Max Nano next week. Are they easy on parameters and large tanks? So, okay, a couple advice with the Red Sea Nano. Had the tank for a couple years. Awesome tank. I did have a doser on it, which shows like 2 or 3 mils a day of calcium milk and mag. It was very minimal. And I did a 5-gallon water change per week. So like a 1 bucket water change. If you got a bigger hose, I could literally drain out a bucket and then dump a new bucket in 5 minutes. And that was it. That's like all I did for the tank, and that tank thrived. That's when I had a ton of rock flowers in, I had acros, I had everything in there. And I was so happy from just doing that 1 bucket water change a week. It made a huge difference. So that's what I would do. It's a good way to go. Devin, are those containers you use for the Voss bottles? What are they? What are they called? Voss water bottles. The connectors. They are little 1/4-inch bulkheads. If you find my video one, I'm pretty sure I linked it all, but it's basically like a 1/4-inch bulkhead. If you look that up on Amazon or somewhere, you'll find it. It's a little push connector. They screw in and they work well. Ecotech looks nice. Yeah, it does work well. Rob move it out during the treatment. Yeah, definitely. If you are using fluconazole, I would pull your Chaeto. Just throw in a 5-gallon bucket with some water. It'll live. He'll be fine. How do you deal with vermitid snails? I have so many, and they are irritating my zoas. So, if you have the odd one, just break off their little tube, where you can super glue over them. I haven't tried this. Who was it that told me? I feel like it. I think it was Mike Paletta when he was on my stream. I think he said he dosed something like the KZ chalk stuff. What's it called? Whatever KZ product is like a chalk. It's like a flocculant, and it helps bind stuff in your water and kind of clear up your water. I believe he had something like that. I don't know if it was the actual KZ brand or if it was like a DIY version, but he claimed that doing a ton of that would actually kill off some of the vermitids. I'll have to go find that stream and watch it later, but it was something along those lines. What's going on, Sky High Reef? Are those snails white? They're usually like little tubes. It's kind of like a weird little funky tube popping up, and those are the ones you'll see. Ready for my episode? We'll have to work on that. Okay, Mark, this one's for you, buddy. So, Mark, we were talking about how Mila's Reef on his stream the other day. We were talking about how to hook up his Versa. So we made a big DIY battery backup, use a big extension cord to get it from the power to his tank, and he wanted a nice way to connect all the different pumps to his power wires. So basically what we rationed on was either using a breaker or a fuse box. These are more for automotive or boats, where you can have your power and your negative, and you have a little fuse panel and all ring terminals to make it pretty. Has a nice cover for it. So that's one option, or you can use something like a bus bar, and that was the other one. I couldn't think of the name at the time, but basically a terminal block, so you can put your 2 main power wires to it, and you can have little connectors and little screw terminals to pull everything off of it. And then it has a nice little like splash cover. So that's basically kind of what we decided on. So there you go, Mark. Battle OCR, keep it up. 49 super chat. Thank you, sir. Mighty kind. Much appreciated. Bumblebees work best. I have heard that. I have one bumblebee snail, so hopefully or apparently he must be doing his job, because I don't really have a vermid snail issue. Tons and tons of people have said bumblebee snails, and I've heard that a bazillion times, so I would bet money on throwing a couple bumblebees in there is probably a wise move to help get rid of them. See what happened. The huge clam in the screen playing behind you. How long have you had it? Gotta stock up on the Alcankel. Yeah, so this clam it's actually a really pretty clam. It is a squamosa clam, because if you want to tell what kind of clam it is, the squamosas have those little like flute type of things coming up the side of it. It's probably about the size of a football. Like, it's a huge clam. I've had it for about a year now. I have no idea how old it is. I got it off a buddy. I bought it off him when he was shutting down his tank, and he bought it off another reefer, so who had it for a long time. So I have no idea how old it is, but it's roughly the size of a football. Squamosas normally don't have that kind of like bluey stuff colors to it, so it's actually really cool because it's a little bit different and unique with the coloration, but it's super cool just because it's so massive. James, aquarium controllers for simple tanks that maybe just want to monitor pH, temp, and ATO system compatibility. Been looking at the Equal Light, but now looking at the Hydros. So either would work for pH and temp. Equal Light or the Hydros will both do that. Equal Light, I think they have a little pump that you could use for an auto top off. I don't know if it comes with their water level sensor though. It might. So either one honestly would do the job for you. Hydros is the newest one. They have more accessories. I haven't seen much of Equal lately, so I don't know if they're still pushing. I think they're more over in Europe and other places. But I did have one, and I gave it to a buddy. It's on his tank now. But I had one, use it for a while. I had it on the Nano, it worked well. So have the Hydros on the tank beside me. So honestly, either one will do the job for you. What's a good beginner clam? Low lighting. I had smaller clams and more susceptible to changes. They are. It is, if a clam is under, I think it's 3 inches, it's mainly relies on filter feeding. So you're going to have to feed a lot of phyto. And if it's a larger clam, they're more photosynthetic. So I would ideally I don't know. I always recommend going a little bit bigger with the clam because it will be hardier, especially photosynthetic. But if you want low light, that's a bit trickier, right? Because clams are light loving. Maximas, I think, are a little bit harder. They're a little more popular. I don't know. The squamose has been super easy for me. I had a maxima in the past, but something ate it eventually. I don't know what, but something started eating the foot from the bottom. I don't know if it's a bristleworm or some other little creature. So because of that, I would recommend putting your clam. I know they make little cradles for clams too. Mine's just on the sand bed, but the little guy that had that happen to. So I'd almost put it on a little pedestal or rock or something just to lift up a little bit, if it is a smaller clam, just to minimize any risk of that. But yeah, with the hydros, I know they have an auto. You can do an auto top off it. Just get the optical sensor in the pump. Makes it super duper easy. So might be one worth looking into. What's gonna make? What else we got? Yes. All right, Bert. Favorite coral and fish. This is such a hard question. Favorite coral. Favorite type of coral. I love millipores. I love the big shaggy polyps on them. They are always up there on my favorite list. I would easily have a tank full of millies. Maybe one day I will. But I just love those big shaggy polyps. It adds a lot of movement, a lot of cool kind of different motion to an otherwise fairly stationary stick of an acro. So millies definitely. Fish. I don't know. Fish is hard. There's so many cool fish out there. I really love the copper band. He's super duper cool fish. Blue spot jawfish is a really cool fish. Love those guys. I don't know. I've always wanted Leonardi wrasse, but they're really expensive, so I can never bring myself to spend hundreds of dollars on a single fish, but they're really pretty. Okay, maybe some of the biggest mistakes we've made as reefers is good. Biggest mistakes. Early days of reefing, using too much GFO. Definitely lost acros in the past by being so paranoid about algae and using too much GFO and watering out your phosphate, which in turn starves your acros. So don't overdo GFO. It's trouble. Use just enough, keep an eye on it if you are dosing it, or rather running it through a reactor. Jeff, always love a fox face as a common fish. Fox faces are cool. I've never owned one though, actually. But they're pretty. Their their little dorsal fins can be poisonous, so don't get yourself jabbed with there. But Battle of Sierra, I want 8 pyramids. Pyramids, butterflies are really pretty fish. I do like them. I used to have one, sadly, when I was moving tanks. I had one in a temporary tank, and I added a fish to it, and it had something and wiped out all the fish in that tank, and that was a very sad day. And that is when I learned my lesson to quarantine, especially if you're getting stuff from wholesalers or unknown sources. Mike, Devin, I was looking at going for Radeon G5s for 72 by 30. Nice. That's a pretty sweet sized tank. And yeah, definitely. They're a solid option. Were you looking at the 15s or the 30s? What's your PO4 right now? Let's take a look. It is, I believe it's around 0.09 on the water box, but let me pull up the app and we will take a look. Here, so let me screen share this again. Okay, so phone. All right, so this is my water box. So alkalinity 8.39 currently, PO4 0.08, NO3 is 18, calcium 464, Mag 1559. So that's actually been pretty good. So I've been pretty happy with how things are with it lately. And now if you remember, a few months ago, my nitrate was 50. That was huge. So it was super duper high, and that part sucked. I was using NitroGuard. I think it's NitroGuard from Orca Labs, and it's kind of like a carbon dosing, but it's kind of like this crystally form of carbon dosing. It's like little rocks almost, and you put an air bubbler on it, and it basically promotes the bacteria and does it. Now, I had a lot of people warn me that it can drop it really fast. So I only use enough for their smaller container, which I think says like 66 or 77 gallons, and I use that on a 200-gallon tank. So I made sure to go low with it, that way go very slowly. Now, if you look at the table of when that was, yeah, so in February it was 44. So I started in probably January. So I went very, very slow, right? You can see it slowly dropped it over time. But that worked pretty well. GFO, I've used just mainly like Royal Phos and GFO for phosphate. And I just change it every once in a while. But same thing with that one. That one was, you know, almost 0.2, 0.18 a while back. And slowly got that back down. Now it's hovering, you know, less than 0.9 is a good place. I mean, rather 0.03 to 0.06 would be nicer, but slowly easing it down. Now, as for the frag tank, that one is. Alright, so why aren't you pulling my results? Parameters. I wonder if my unit's offline or something. It's not showing my latest results, pulling it from it. I will get that one a reboot later. All right. Rob, I want a copper band and a gem tang. Copper bands are awesome fish. Just make sure it's eating well. A big thing with copper bands that I find works well, and a buddy actually showed me this one originally, but if you get manila clams from the seafood market, every one I've tried has eaten those. So if you can't get to eat, go to a seafood market, get manila clams, throw them in your freezer, like get the fresh ones on ice, and throw one in every few days, and it's like a big treat for them. Everyone I've seen went for it. Clyde, how many tanks do you own and maintain? What's your best practices? I have 2 tanks now. I've had many more in the past. I kind of made an agreement with the wife, 2-tank limit, which is why they're both bigger tanks. That's kind of my workaround. So I have a 6'7" or 7-foot-ish frag tank beside me, which is kind of like my play tank, experiment tank. You know, let stuff grow in it and just mess around with the tank. And then I have my water box, which I'm trying to mess with less. So I got 2 tanks right now. In the past, I've had many more tanks. So yeah, 2 tanks now. Best practices, test your tank on a regular basis. That's a big one. I have the auto testers now, which is amazing because I'm a slacker testing. I'll be really consistent for a while, and then I'll be slacking for a while. So it's good. Test your tank on a regular basis, but that's the biggest one. Otherwise, something can slowly skew over time and fall out of range, and if you don't test, you're not going to know. And you can run into issues eventually if stuff is not kind of kept in check. So whether, you know, some people are a big fan of water changes, some aren't. I personally am a big fan of doing the small automated ones. You can kind of see I got a little brute can here, so I finally did one on the frag tank recently, but that one gets way less water changes because I got to do it manually, where the other one's automated and it gets tiny daily ones, so it goes a long way. Not less Grossman. I have my nitrates under control for a while and calc with ATO, but my coralline algae is so slow to spread. Anything I can do to help my coralline? I actually made a quick video on that a few weeks ago. So coralline algae needs to be introduced. It sounds like you already have some, but it's slow at spreading. If you can get a rock or like an old snail shell, something that has coralline algae already on it from like a friend, go take that and rub it randomly around your rock, because that's going to put the little spores, the little tiny flakes of it all around your tank, and then it's going to be more places for it to start growing and spreading. And I found that's the best way to kind of get your rocks turning purple quicker. Do you think the Mastertronic is worth the price? For me, it is. It's not cheap, but it is the only tester that will test everything you care about. So calcium, elk, magnesium, nitrates, phosphates, and it tests water clarity, which is its OLI parameter. Now, there's lots of other testers out there, but they test some things, not all of them. So that's the big one for me. And it has enough vials to hold it all. Now, the other big advantage is a lot of the other testers make you test a certain frequency or so many times per day. Like, I don't care about knowing my nitrates and phosphates, every 4 hours or every day, right? Like once a week is all I care about. Actually, I lie, I have that one twice a week, but the rest of them is once a week, right? So that part is like a big advantage for me. And I like that it's kind of semi-universal in which test kits you can use with it. So you're not like locked into a specific brand or company. You can, go pick one up at the LFS, providing they carry compatible brands. The other cool thing is they're adding more parameters. I know iodine's next for the next update, which will be good because I have the Alcatronic. I have mine test elk as like a double check, but I don't really need it to test it because I already have the Alcatronic. So for instance, I'll swap that to iodine, and then which iodine is more important for zoas and some of the corals like that. So then I can kind of tweak my iodine and keep that in check a little more. So I'm probably gonna swap to that one. James, I swear, I thought you said in one of your videos you had some aggression amongst your yellow tangs and a fox face would get between them and stop the fight. No, that might have been someone else's tank, not on mine. I did recently add a second yellow tang to my frag tank, which of course had the little battle for the first day or two, so I went with the lovely, as it's still sitting here, so threw the lovely mirror on the side of the tank, and had the mirror on there and did that to distract them, and I also went as far as separating them for a day or two to let the first one out, just this like crafty mesh, crochet mesh, whatever it is. I basically split the tank right down the middle just so they each had their own half, and the more aggressive one could tire himself out with the mirror for the first day or two before I let them mingle. And then there was like a little bit the first day, and now it's like, I'm going to say 90% good now. So, but that being said, in my other tank, I have 3 yellow tangs, and they're all friends, and everyone's good. If you are having multiple tangs, especially of the same species, like zebra mosa or the yellows, it is always best if you can introduce them at the same time. So it's a good consideration. Tracy Spielman, thank you very much, buddy. Enjoyed the stream with Mark. It was awesome. Really glad to helped him back. Happy to do so. Good to see you on Saturdays. Keep all this work. Awesome. Thank you very much, Tracy. Much appreciated. Yeah, it was fun being on Mark's stream. So yeah, it was good. Good to get him back online. He's a solid, reliable Saturday one. So hopefully be back at it now. The one and only dolphin. I am acclimating my fish right now, and they are hyperventilating. Should I be worried? What kind of fish is it? So, yeah, it kind of depends what it is. Some fish will just do that when they're stressed out. If there's a big parameter swing, just make sure you're acclimating them slowly. That's the biggest thing. Like, set up a drip and just drip it very slowly and mix it in. And if that's, yeah, honestly the biggest thing. Depends. If you just got it from the LFS, you shouldn't have any ammonia or anything really in the bag to worry about. So just make sure the pH and all the parameters are balanced out in temperature. All right, Mike, at work, didn't get to finish 72 by 30 by 30, looking at 5 XR15s. Would you suggest the 30s? My real question. I like the blue spectrum, but I like the range of the pros. So on the 15, I'm going to say is, 2 feet by 2 feet would be kind of like the zone of coverage. If you're going 30, now it partially depends on your rock scape, but if your scape is coral all the way glass to glass, you can get away with 15s, but having that extra little bit of the 30 would give you a bit better coverage and spread for that extra like 5 inches or 6 inches of tank space. So I would be tempted to get the 30s just because you're going for 30 instead of 24, but this also depends on your tank scape and kind of like how your layout is. Now for the blues versus the pros, if you're not running your lights at 100%, if you are running them at say 80%, you can get a very similar look out of either light. If you're running your lights at 100%, it's going to be bluer with the blues and it's going to be whiter with the pros because you have those extra colors. It's going to be more of like I'm going to say like 14 to 18K halide look out of the pros, where the blues will be more the 80 plus spectrum. So that's kind of personal. I like the pros because it's still hard to see, but if you see the video behind me, it's whiter to the eye, but you still get lots of really nice color pop and color rendition, and I find that hard to get out of most lights, and that's one thing that really draws me to the pros is it looks crisp, but you still get color pop. and you still get that vibrance out of it, which is, I think, personally, I think it's a cool look. And then I have more of the blue at the night and everything else. John Reefer Vermont, for what you did for me, Lizzers. Of course, man. I'm happy to do it, and thank you very much for the super chat. Much appreciated. Yeah, no, definitely. Mark's an awesome guy, so always happy to help out. Brent Miller. Dude, thank you guys very much for the super chats. Much appreciated. Love the channel. Keep up the good work. You have used both LG Scrubbers, Clearwater, and Refugium on your tanks. It seems like you like Refugiums more than Scrubbers. What is the pros and cons from your perspective? So I have one of each. I have the Clearwater Scrubber on the frag tank, and I have a Refugium on the water box tank. Now, both are going to take nutrients out. Both are going to do the job. A Refugium is less effort, I'm going to say, because you can have this big ball of Chaeto, you can let it grow and grow and grow. It was compact and compact. Now, as it compacts, ideally you should harvest it so that you get kind of more growth out of it. If you don't harvest it, it will kind of stunt the growth a bit when it runs out of room to grow. Now, so it's low maintenance in that respect. You could ignore it for a couple months at a time. Now, with a turf scrubber, you can ignore it for a while, but your best to clean it off, every 2 weeks or so, and kind of clean off that screen, let it regrow, which reminded me I'm due to clean mine again because it's probably been 2 weeks. Now, if a pro of a turf scrubber, the turf scrubber grows hair algae, and hair algae is a simpler form of algae, so it grows faster than Chaeto does. So that's kind of why you can get good bang for buck for its size. So it's really good output for the little size. And one huge benefit too is it contains it all. It keeps your sump nice and clean. You don't have algae growing in your skimmers and everywhere else in your sump. So that's a big consideration. Now, if you're on a fish only system, the hair algae is also better at pulling out ammonia and other stuff that you'd have in a fish only system. So that's another big plus in using it on there. So they do work very well for their output for their size, but it's a little more maintenance, and that's kind of the trade-off, I'd say. I have one in each tank. I have that in there, and then the rest of my sump chamber, which would normally be a Refugium, is full of Euphilia and other corals. So it's allowed me to have more space in my sump. Originally, I did it so I keep my sump nice and pristine, but now there's coral down there, so that was a moot point. So, but that's kind of the trade-off on that one. Juice, do you use a par meter when setting up your lights? What's your high par range? Yes, I do. I do have an Apogee par meter. It works quite well. I don't even remember what my par is, but I'm going to guess it was roughly in the 350, 380 for kind of the higher range. What I generally do is I generally shoot for around 100 par at the sand bed, like 100 to 120-ish, and then up from there, then you'll get kind of like the 250 to 350, 380 type of thing on the higher up in the tank. And that's roughly the kind of range that I tend to go for. I might actually par test my tank again. I honestly haven't done it in ages since I set the lights up like 8-9 months ago, or a year ago. But yes, so battling cyano. Okay, so Dan, battling cyano, nutrients lowish, phosphates 0.03, nitrates 10, tank is 8 months old. Should I dose Microbacter 7 and just wait it out? You 100% can. You can dose Microbacter 7. That should help with it. If you want the big bang approach, you could use ChemiClean, which will get rid of it in a day or two. And then if you want, use Microbacter 7 for more of like an ongoing maintenance. Or if you dose Microbacter 7, I've heard that will get rid of it as well over time. Just keep that up. So I have waited it out. I actually haven't tried dosing Microbacter 7 for the purpose of getting rid of cyano, but I have heard that works. So if you do it, let me know. But quick big bang approach, use something like ChemiClean. I think the instructions say 24 hours, 40 hours. I've always waited 72 hours, so wait 3 days and then do your water change. So I would manually suck it out with a hose, physically remove all the mats of it, do your water change, to suck it out. Then I would dose ChemiClean, wait the 2 or 3 days. When you're dosing it, the bacteria does suck oxygen out of your water. So I usually take the skimmer cup off and put like just a bowl or something on it so that the bubbles flow back down to the tank, and just using that to keep the oxygen levels high in the tank. And then after that, I would just do something like Microbacter 7 as a bit of a maintenance dose, just to kind of replenish all your good bacteria and kind of keep it in check. Camille, I just bought a dying acan for a decent price. New to the hobby, so wondering what's the best way to recover it. Acans benefit from feeding, and it was probably never fed, and that's probably why it's fading. So I would find some smaller particulate foods and try and feed it. And just try and feed it every couple days, and probably just put it in lower light for now, and then just try feeding it until it recovers. Mike, thanks for your plethora of information. You are most welcome. All right, John, Reefer, Vermont. What are your thoughts on Vibrant? I know it's a band-aid, but I wanted to know if you have used it in the past. I have used it for the sole purpose of getting rid of bubble algae in my old Red Sea 20-gallon tank. And it 100% did work for that. So, for my purpose of removing bubble algae, it worked well. Red Sea Forever. Pods work well. I dose live pods. I used to do that, actually. I used to culture pods and dose them. Every once in a while, I will stock it up. Reef Nutrition has their Tisbee pods and Tiger pods that work pretty well. So I've always used those for like starters to get, a bunch of good pods into the tank. And yeah, I did culture them for a while and dose them, and yeah, they do work well. Rob B, I'm dosing Microbacter 7 now to chase away cyano. See how it goes. Keep me updated, Rob. I'm really curious because I have heard that work, so it'd be awesome to get some more confirmations on that. Nerd Aquarius, Chem Clean works great for me. Never had a problem with it. Yep, same here. Matt Gear, some Microbacter 7's working on it for my cyano, but taking a long time. Yeah, what is a long time? Good question. How often and what do you feed your acans? So I have fed mine a mixture of mysis or reefroids, just randomly. Now, if you feed them, I find they get better colors. They'll be more poofy. They'll be happier. I don't feed mine enough recently, but when I used to feed them regularly, they were super happy, more colorful, super poofy, which I should do some spot feeding later. Thanks for the reminder. Clyde, currently battling Dino, slowly increasing my fish and coral feeding, reduced to no water changes, dosing Microbacter Clean. What else should I do? Slowly increasing my fish and coral feeding. Now, a big chunk of it too is figuring out which type of dinos you have. If they are the photosynthetic kind, UV does work wonders on that one. I did have cyano in 2 different times, or not cyano, dinos. First time, I dosed Dr. Tim's waste away, and then I did some vodka dosing with that, and one of the bacteria in there will help fight dinos, so I did that. So you dose that. I did microbubbling at the time to add more water or oxygen to the water. I did some vodka dosing to help up that army of it. Now, at the same time, you also want to add some good bacteria. So if you want to do something like Microbacter 7 or something as well, that's going to help add the good bacteria to help kind of reestablish your system. And that did work over time. There was a big post from the Elegance Corals from Cruz and myself. We did a stream on it back in the day, and we just search for dinos in the Rootoots Facebook group. There will be like a big write-up on that. Definitely read that for kind of more details, more steps on it. Now, UV also works, and when I had it in the lagoon tank in the past, I bought the 57 watt Aqua UV tank, which is now in the water box, and I put that on the lagoon tank for like 3 or 4 weeks. I put a little CJ pump on it, and I literally just hung it right in the tank and let it recirculate through, and I ran that for a few weeks, and that got rid of 90% of it within like a week. So UV definitely does work. Now, there's some types of dinos that UV doesn't work on, but it does work on the majority of them. Joe, what do you think about PNS ProBio? I believe that is those little glass vials. I'm just quickly googling it, but I believe that's what it is. And oh no, PNS ProBio. Oh, that's those big bottles. I have not used that one, so I don't know. I have seen it, but I've never used it, so that is a good question. Alan, how do you determine if you have a bacteria bloom or just cloudy water? So cloudy water is generally from a bacteria bloom. I mean, you could stir up your sand bed and that gives you cloudy water, right? But it's either particulates or it's usually bacteria. If you just dumped a bunch of sand in your tank, it's probably, little bits of particles in the water, in which case like filter socks, skimmer, some polyfill, any type will take it out. If it is a bacteria bloom, which is generally from dosing too much bacteria, if you're carbon dosing, you fed too much bacteria, which causes the population to explode, and now you have a bacteria bloom. Now with that, I mean, it generally will go away on its own. UV can help tone it down. Your skimmer will help suck it out. Ozone would likely help, but any one of those should work to help tone it down. So part of it would just be kind of, what did you do to get that? You probably added something or something happened to do it. And I'm going to just guess it's likely bacteria bloom. Nerd Aquarius, I'm thinking to use Vibrant. I'm rethinking my use of Vibrant or any other bacteria. I've always noticed a dip in pH for a couple days with anything I dose. So when you dose a lot of these, like I think Vibrant's more of an algicide, but if you dose any of these bacteria products, there is the bacteria consume, just like a fish, just like any other creature, you're adding thousands of tiny little microscopic organisms, but they also are going to suck oxygen out of your tank. And if they're sucking in oxygen and they're exporting or exhaling CO2, I don't know how the tiny amounts work, but they consume oxygen as they expand, which is going to lower your pH. So overdosing any bacteria is going to probably have an impact on your pH and dose it down a little bit. So food for thought. Rob, I'm going about 2 months now, dosing Microbacter 7 twice a week with Dr. Tim's Wasteway once a week. Nice. I heard about micro bubbling from Mila's Reef. How I use bubbles to pull out the dinos. What is microbubbling? I have some videos on that one too from way back in the day. So microbubbling is essentially using micro bubbles, which if you can see big bubbles floating around, your bubbles are too big. Most people do too big of micro bubbles. But if you think of your skimmer creates bubbles, bits of organics attached to the bubbles, and they're taken to your cup and then they pop. And that's how they're exported from the tank. Microbubbling is basically using something like a lime wood or wooden air stone. Generally, you put it in your sump somewhere and let the power or your return pump suck up the microbubbles. That your way, you're not getting the big one. You're just getting the minuscule ones. The big ones pop, teeny ones go in the tank. No, because they're so tiny, they have a lot of dwell time. They'll float around your tank. They'll go all over the place. And as organics or as stuff attaches to them, they'll slowly lift it to the surface where it can be moved to your overflow and go down through your filtration. So that's kind of the theory. It's basically like turning your tank into a big skimmer and helping it export stuff that way. That's the quick thing of it. Now for, sorry, I'll try. With, now doing it in your tank, now if you're pulling outside air or something with microbubbling, it's going to add a big pH boost. If you have high CO2 in your air, it's probably going to be a moot point on that one. But it's adding extra oxygen to your water and helping remove small organics from your water. That's kind of the basic gist of it. Do you know the difference between Brightwell, Razor, and Vibrant? I do not. Both of them are for helping you get rid of algae. Different companies, I'm sure they're different formulas. I don't know enough of the inner working specifics to fully say on that one. But I've used them both, and they both seem to work, so... Oh, bird just flew by my window. Tracy, on my way back from buying some coral, was a good ratio of hydrogen peroxide to use for a light dip. So it depends what type of coral. If you're dipping something like a Zoa, you can put it in 100% hydrogen peroxide, but don't do it more than about a minute to a minute and a half. If it's an acro or something, then probably more of a 50-50. If it's smooth skin, don't do it. But generally, just a quick dip. Or if you want to be a little bit safer too, you could just put a little bit on a toothbrush and then just scrub the plug or whatever you're trying to kill any algae off of. Alan, bacteria bloom, cloudy water. Tank has been out for 5 months. Didn't dose any bacteria. The weird thing is that cycling the water was crystal clear. Once I added fish, then it clouds. So it could be like a fish stirring up the sandbed. I have wrasses, it'll dive bomb, and all of a sudden there's a big cloud in my tank. But generally the filtration takes that out fairly quick. Yeah, it has to be a bacteria bloom. It's hard to say what caused it, to be honest, but that's my guess. Tracy had to stop at Chick-fil-A for a bite in the super chat. Mighty kind, mighty kind. Alright guys, I think I finally caught up on the chat. So if you guys got any other questions, be sure to let me know. We'll get it. I'm just quickly skimming through the Facebook group and see if there's any in there that I missed that were kind of pre-stream ones. Doug, fluctuations in a reef tank, how tight should we keep our parameters? Basically, what is meant to be stable, 50 ppm or more. I'm assuming that's nitrates at 50 ppm. What would you suggest we do to get the best biodiversity in our reef tank? Dosing phyto, pros and cons. Okay. So, stability. Most parameters, if they're in like a happy range, it doesn't really matter what they're at as long as they're stable. Corals will adapt. You know, your elk could be 7, it could be 11. Most corals will adapt, but they don't like swings. So keep whatever you do, like pick a number and try and stick there. That's the biggest advice I'd give on that one. Now, too high of nutrients can slow down coral growth, right? If you have 2 ppm of phosphate, your coral's growth is going to be much more inhibited than if you have, the 0.03, 0.05 type of thing. So stability is key, but you also want stuff to be in a reasonable range. Elk 7 to 11, personally, I like between 8 and 9. Calcium, 350 to 500 ish, or 380, 500. I keep mine, 420, 450. Magnesium, 1250, 1450 range. I keep mine higher, like 1500. So that's a good way to look at it. Reef betta, what coral dip do you use? I found Revive is too harsh for acros. It depends. Recently, I found Reef Primer from Polyp Lab has worked pretty well. It is potassium salts, and I actually find it's fairly gentle. I have that. I have some Bear. I have Revive. I have Coral X. Like, I just randomly do it. And I've had times where I've just, like, picked a different one each week. Or if I'm targeting something specific, it may play into it. But generally, yeah. They all work, but just don't overdo it. Most of them have a recommendation of how long to dip stuff. Some of them, if you go past it, it's going to be too harsh on your coral. So you got to read the instructions, take that into consideration. Same thing with Revive. Make sure you're doing the proper ratios. For the longest time, I just put in a glug and didn't really measure and actually follow the direction. It does make a difference. Goodwin, are you happy with ozone through your skimmer? Do you feel there is value in reactors like the Vast Mutiny? Do you feel there is an issue running ozone and UV stabilizer on the same tank? There is 0 issues, as you can see in the video behind me. 6 feet of water, you can see crystal clear to the back. So I am a huge fan of water clarity, especially the Peninsula tank, and especially looking down that long end of it. So my water is like super duper clear, which I absolutely love. Makes me happy. I love super duper clear water. Floating fish, all good. Now that's UV and ozone. So I started filming a video. I haven't put this one out yet, but I've added a Ozotech reactor to my big tank. So I had like some cheaper China one before, which I now moved to my frag tank. So I do have ozone on both tanks now. And I have the fancier Ozone Tech on the water box tank. And I've actually been turning it down because the thing puts out some pretty good ozone. So I had it estimated at where it should be for my size tank. And even still, I turned it down. And my ORP is at 380 to 420-ish. And I have limiters to shut it off if it gets above 420. But yeah, it works very, very well. Main advantage is one, helps reduce any smells. If you have any fishy or oceany smells, it helps get rid of it. And that and crystal clear water are the 2 biggest things for me. Mike, Kalkwasser or calcium reactor? I hear benefits of both and can't decide. I know a reactor will handle more, take out more, but you have to deal with pH, not the calc. Okay, so I have both, and I now have both running on the frag tank. I just have a calcium reactor on my water box. So calcium reactors, biggest couple really big benefits. Now, a calcium reactor is very stable and very consistent. Especially if you have a pH probe, if you have it tuned to stay in a range, and you have continuous duty pump. So continuous duty pump, I think, is a key to it. You can do it with a drip rate, but stuff will fluctuate. Mine is fed with the Versa. In the past, I had the Kimura on it. I swapped to the Versa because it was quieter. But it is very, very consistent, kind of like Doser, right? It runs 24/7. And my elk would swing 0.1, right? So it'd be 8.49, then 12 hours later it'd be 8.59. It literally this 0.1 of a swing. So it's super duper stable. And that is a huge plus for stability. That's one of my biggest reasons I like a calcium reactor. is that stability. The second biggest benefit to me is if you're dosing, you have to fill up your dosing containers every few weeks or every month, whatever, depending on the size of your container, right? So you got to top them off. You know, you're mixing. I've always done the bulk solutions. So then you got to mix up the bulk solution. Then you got to top off, you know, remember to top it off. You're out of town, forget to refill it. Where a calcium reactor, literally refill it once a year, every year and a half, right? You refill your CO2 bottle, like my 10-pound one. It's been a year and I haven't refilled it yet. Like, I'm starting to think I might do it soon as preventative, but it's cheap to run and it's low effort. Like, if you're like the lazy reefer, it's nice to be able to set it and forget it for like a year. And all I got to do, if my elk is, my elk's going down, I just add an extra like mill a minute to the feed pump. So stability is a huge chunk of it. Mark, welcome. You're late. You are late. Welcome. Better late than never. So that's some of the huge benefits of a calcium reactor. Now, the sole downside to a calcium reactor, I mean, one, they're expensive. Welcome, Port Wolf. And two is they do lower your pH. You're dosing CO2, which lowers pH because you're using low pH to melt the media. Now you're taking that low pH water and dosing it to the tank. So you're putting low pH water in your tank. So that's the biggest downfall. Now there's things you can do to mitigate it. You know, if you're dosing it to your refugium, that CO2 is going to actually help the plants grow. Like if you have a freshwater tank, you're dosing CO2 to help the plants grow better. So it helps your refugium. Or if you have like algae reactor, same thing. It'll help it grow better. Now, what I've been doing now is I have it dosing in front of just my skimmer intake. So my skimmer is actually helping off-gas a lot of that CO2. Probably slightly counterproductive because I also have the CO2 media on top, so I'm probably using it up a bit quicker, but it works well. Okay, now the other part of the question, I'll go back to that in a second. Now, calc reactor. So calc, it does a very good job for a simple dosing solution. I have the ice cap one on my tank, and same thing, feeding with a continuous duty pump, and it will very, very easy. So I have a good chunk of coral in my tank, and I used it for the last like 6-8 months, whatever it's been, on the frag tank. And I just added the calcium reactor in because it started to watch my elk drop, and I was manually dosing elk by hand. Like, it was starting to not keep up anymore, and that's why I started adding the calcium reactor in. But if you don't have a crazy high load, calc can take you a long way, and it remediates a lot of those pH issues. What amino do I use? I have the Brightwell Coral Restore, I believe it is. It's actually made for more of a fragging dip, but I have that one on a doser, doing I believe it's about 3 mils a day on my big tank. Okay, sorry, gotta catch up on the chat. I was way behind now. Do you know if coral aminos are different from unflavored BCAAs for humans? I do not know. I have no idea. There is a ton of different types of amino acids, and I'm sure there is definitely a blend between the people ones and the tank ones, and you could probably dose people ones to your tank, but I'm not sure. Mr. Peter Sherrick from RNN, what's going on, buddy? Brett, I'm excited to have to refill reservoirs for CA and elk on the new tank. That's good. Mike, do you run a CO2 scrubber with your calcium reactor? Yes, I do. I do have both in my tank. I've been fighting the whole war on pH on my big tank, and I have been using it. What is my pH? Let's look. So, going back 3 or 4 months ago before Devin's endless battle on pH, my pH was super low, like 7.8 low. And I've been trying to get it up ever since, and which is why I've done a bazillion different things and reactors to try and up my pH. So it's finally getting back to a happy zone now, where if we look back, before I was 7.8, barely grazing 8, and now in the last 24 hours my low was 7.95 with a high of 8.15. So it's a much happier zone. So I've definitely been a big fan of it. But yeah, so yeah, 7.9 something, my lowest day was right there. No idea why it was lower, but still it is average 8.04, low 7.9, maximum 8.19. So overall, it's been in a pretty happy place now. I slipped Canadian Fiber at the door. Nice. How acidic and how base of a solution is. Oh yeah, that's to do with more of your pH. Sorry I'm late, no problem. Welcome, Johnny. What controller are you using on the water box? I have the Apex in the water box. Port Wolf, by the way, you sound good over the new stereo. Excellent. YouTube is doing closed captioning as you speak and seems to be doing a good job. Huh, good to know. I'm not actually watching the live, so that's kind of cool. Going to miss you this weekend. I know, I'm sad that I'm not at RAP. I wish I was. I miss shows. Honestly, it's probably gonna be next year by the time I get to go to a show again. Maybe fall, probably next year. We'll see. But I miss hanging with my Reef buddies. What about the high point of the day? So yeah, my high point is, 8.18, 8.2, somewhere in that range. Love seeing your cell phone on screen, so fancy. Why, thank you. What temp do I keep my tank at? Let's take a look. I believe it's 77, 78, somewhere around there. Currently, temp, 76.5. So, has a bit of swings, but average 76, so just shy of 77. 75 to 78. If you have your tank at a lower temperature, it evaporates less. So, that's one advantage to doing it. And the other one is to higher temperature speeds up the metabolism of everything in your tank. Fish, coral, so stuff can potentially grow faster with higher temps, but stuff could also go wrong at higher temps. So I don't know. I personally left it a little bit lower, and I had blue spot jawfish and other things in the past that like a bit cooler. So that's why I'm kind of at 76, 77-ish before. I upped it a smidge recently, but yeah. Rob, currently 8.3. I'm jealous of your high pH. Devin, what would you try to catch a Tomini tang? I have about everything, including nori, clams, feeding frenzy, praying to the gods. He just looks at the traps and laughs about it. Yeah, fish are a pain to catch. It took me like a week to finally catch my copper band. What I actually did, I had a really big net, and I left it in there for a while. And I literally just had some food or something, and then I waited until he swam in front of it and just went against the tank. But I left the net in the tank for like all day, so he'd be desensitized to it. But it definitely took a little while to do it. What do you feed your clam? I don't feed it anything specifically. I broadcast feed the tank most of the time. So my daily tank feeding, I guess, per se, would be in the morning, I feed nori. And do I have any close by? Don't see any. I use sushi nori. There is like branded ones, but I just go to the Asian supermarket. You get sushi nori. Make sure there's no flavors, just no salts, just straight up raw nori, roasted nori, and I feed that daily. So every morning I put that in. At nighttime, 90% of the time I feed frozen mysis. So I just thaw it and just dump in some frozen mysis. I do have canalis I feed sometimes as well. And then I will randomly feed the corals, like with like I have some of the Reef Blizzard ZC, which is like little copepods and zooplankton, and then I have the Reefroids and some of the LPS pellets. I don't use as much, but I will randomly either target feed once in a while when I'm extra motivated, but majority of the time I just broadcast feed the tank, put it in front of the power heads and let it blow everywhere, and let the corals and whatever catch it. Earlier when we were talking about acans definitely benefit from being target fed. There's a couple things in my tank that should be target fed more, like fathead dendro. I have 2 heads of that, and that should really be target fed more to keep that happy. So there's certain things that do benefit from it. So I mean, once a week is a good idea to target feed certain corals, but majority of the time just broadcast feeding I find works pretty well. I am jealous of you guys going to reef shows. Right now, it's still a bit of a pain to travel, because if I leave Canada and come back, then I got to quarantine for 2 weeks. And then you have to like pay for a hotel for 3 nights, and they overly charge you, and you have to pay for it. And it just adds a lot of expense to it. So sadly, until things normalize, I'll be home. Hammy's Reef, how do you make DIY flatworm stop? So, flatworm stop, in theory, what I read online on forums is mainly, wormwood extract. Now, I'm sure the legit stuff has extra stuff added in and there's more stuff to it. I don't know what their exact formula is, but I know a few people have told me this and I tried it. And I am dosing some on my water box right now. But you basically take like I will look later, I'll find it. I ordered off Amazon, but it was wormwood extract, and I think it's like a tea or something. But I took this big pouch of it and I put it in a gallon of water and I soaked the wormwood extract. I left it for 3 or 4 days to extract all the stuff from it. And I ran it through like a strainer with some paper towel and a few things to fully strain out all the particles. And that was basically my DIY flatworm stop. Now, I found no harm or no negative of dosing it. Whether there's a benefit is hard to say. Throat's getting dry talking about myself the whole time. But overall, like in theory, the flatworm stop helps corals have a thicker flesh coat. That's supposed to help them encrust faster. Those are the claims, at least, from it. So I've been doing it. It just seems like win-win. Why not try it? Maybe I'll make a fresh batch of the DIY one. I'll do a little video on it when I do it. Maybe that'll be a future one to do. But yeah, so overall that, I think... Let's see what I'm actually dosing for it. Because I don't even remember how much I'm dosing. Let me pull up the screen sharing again. Okay, so we have connect to Mobius, let it load. I don't know, I had my blue spot for probably 7 or 8 months, and I haven't seen him in the last week, so he's either hiding under a rock somewhere. I don't know if he perished or if he's hiding or what happened, but I haven't seen him recently. So wormwood extract, I'm dosing 20 mils a day of my DIY stuff on 200 gallons. So there you go. I dose 10 mil at noon and around 10 mil at midnight. So that's I'm dosing that on 20 gallons of my gallon-ish of DIY wormwood extract. There you go. See all the random stuff I'm dosing to my big tanks. I got the calcium reactor running at 43.5 mils per minute. Got my auto water change. So I'm currently doing 5 liters a day. I was doing more, but I was low on salt, so I turned it down a bit. 2 mil the coral booster and the flatworm stop. That's like the legit actual ones. And I got my DIY on top of that. And for all, I got Chaeto Grow for 2 mil, coral color, restore, and replenish. So that's all the random stuff I'm dosing. And then just to add a little extra fun, I also have some of the moonshiner stuff I'm dosing on top of that. Most days. I'm a slacker and forget some days, but why did you remove the copper band? I did not. Well, I didn't remove him. I moved him from my frag tank and put him in the water box. So he's probably somewhere in the clip behind me swimming around. So they're super duper cool fish. And yeah, I don't know. I love the copper bands. Really cool personalities. My only worry or hesitation is he going to nip or eat any coral? So my frag tank, you can't see it, but it's right beside me. So he was in my frag tank for the past like month and a half to 2 months. And I kept an eye on him and I didn't ever see him munch on any coral. So I figured that was a good enough test to move into the big tank. And then part of me is like, oh, I wonder if he'll munch on my clam or something. But he's like minuscule compared to the size of my clam. So I think I'm okay there. Like here, I think I have a photo of him beside the clam. Yeah, if you look at that, look how big the clam is compared to him. So he's like super tiny. He's like not even like a quarter of the clam, if that, like an eighth of him. So I think the clam should be safe for a while. But we were talking earlier about that. You can see all the size of the little volutes on the side of the clam, and as I can tell, it's a scomosa. Now you can see that lovely aptasia there. So hopefully he does his job and actually eats aptasia. I need a well-behaved one. Am I using an emulator on the phone? I am not. I am actually have a program on my desktop that lets it be like an Apple device, so I can screencast to it. So I'm doing that. So I'm casting it to my computer to get the phone off of there. I need more Versapumps. I do too. I mean, I'm spoiled. I have a bunch, but they're. I'm hoping they'll be in stock soon. I know Ecotech was moving buildings, new location, resetting up shop. So hopefully they'll be back out in the world soon. There's always uses for more dosing pumps. But yeah, no, so far so good with the copper van. Fingers crossed he actually eats my Aptasia. He was in the frag tank, and I think he actually helped get the little ones. I don't think he touched the big ones though. So I'm probably gonna have to order some more Aptasia and then use that on all the big guys, and hopefully any little babies that pop up, I'm hoping he'll take care of them, and I'll get the tank to a happy Aptasia-free zone. That's really my only pest I'm dealing with in the big tank right now. So that's my long-term, hopefully, goal. Alright guys, we are at an hour and a half, so if you got any other questions, let me know. My throat is slowly drying up from all this talking. But yeah, no, overall, things are good. I did lose a couple heads of torch though. That kind of sucked. I don't know why. But I had a couple heads of torch kind of like brown jelly just fade away on me over like overnight in my one tank, so I fragged off the dead and then put the good ones back, and yeah. Had that, and then if you can't fully see, but the very back of the tank got a purple bonsai. I had part of that STN on me like a few weeks back, so I again fragged off the bad chunk and put the good chunk back in, and I have no idea why. Aside from that, those are my two weirdness happening in the water box, but aside from that, everything else has been good and happy lately. So you're talking for 4 hours. Nope, I can't do 4 hours, Mark. 2 hours is the max he'll get out of me on my stream for now, at least by myself. The throat's getting drier and drier. But yeah, Rob B got the BRS notification, gone in 40 minutes. Yeah, it's not, nah, 40 minutes is not bad actually. I have been trying to upgrade my computer for editing for like a month now, and trying to buy a video card is like brutal. Like you literally, they're gone in seconds. It's ridiculous. You click on it, and I have one in my cart, and I on Best Buy's website, I went to hit the checkout, and it took like 5 minutes for the checkout thing to load, and by the time I did, it was already sold out. I'm like, ah. So it's ridiculous right now trying to get like any like decent computer parts. Keep asking questions and making it. Hey, if you keep the questions coming, I'll keep going for a little bit. So ask good questions. What do you want to know? Ask your reefing questions. Oh, super. Speaking of that, the little Antius that's right in the middle on the top, super cool guy. He's like super bubbly. He has like yellow and like cool things on his fins. It's pretty good. How many beers is that in 4 hours? That was only one because we never left to get refills, so just one sipping brew. But yeah, versus video cards, good processors, all almost impossible lately. So not the best time to upgrade. Always get notifications while you're working. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, if you are trying to get after stuff, having alerts set up to email you or send you notifications is a good way to do it. How often do I clean my glass? Probably every other day. Yeah, I'd say every other day, and then maybe like once a month I'll give it like a really good clean. After like a day or two, I kind of get like a little bit of a haze on it. And it's probably because I have higher nutrients. If I get those down, I'm hoping I'll have to clean it less. But yeah, bots are buying them, and it drives me nuts because they're fast and it's hard to compete with them. Speaking of cleaning the glass, because I did this the other day before I filmed the video, I bought this thing off Amazon like ages ago for like 20 bucks, and it uses like the old school shaving blades, but you can get in there in any core line or any little spots by the sand bed. It works really well for cleaning it. So I don't know, this thing works really, really well. But every once in a while I'll go do the edges of the sand bed that normally don't get cleaned very well, or if there's any like stubborn spots, it's a good way to get it. But in general, I have the flipper on my tank, and I never use the scrubby side. I only use the razor blade, and I have one on each side, and I'll usually just go get a quick clean like every day or two. How many tangs total? I have 6 tangs, I think. Yeah, 3 yellows, sailfin, hippo purple. Yeah, I got 6 in there. So good chunk of tangs. Lots of big eaters and poopers. And then in my frag tank, I have 2 yellow tangs. I had another local buddy reefer who was outgrowing his tank, so he said, "Do you want a yellow tang?" I was like, okay. I was a bit worried about adding 2 in, but I'm like, they're awesome algae eaters. They're harder to get, so couldn't say no. So we're up to 2 in the other one now. So I have 5 yellow tangs now. It's kind of crazy, but they're amazing algae eaters, so they're good. Ada Miller. I have a clown who just started acting aggressive. He was fine till last week. Suddenly his territory the whole tank. I've got him a tiny tank now. Should I trade him or let him in rehab? So If you have a pair of clowns and they have eggs or something, they're super aggressive. In general, they'll usually stick to one little area, and if it's like something they're hosting, they might be a bit more aggressive about it. Like certain ones, like I know, what are the big red ones called? Anyways, the tomato clowns, those guys get aggressive. I find normal like perks and oscillators aren't too bad though. Rob, have I ever used Razor by Brightwell? I have actually. Back when I had some kind of a weird bacteria algae thing, I don't even know what the heck it was, but it worked. Help get rid of it. I don't even know what it was though, but it was kind of my hammer approach. Sounds like the clownfish is mating. Yeah, if you have a pair of clownfish, it could be more aggressive for that reason. Reef Sea Fever, aren't you scared of scratching your glass with a metal blade? Maroon Clown, thank you, Brett. They're aggressive little buggers. Okay, if you have a stainless steel razor blade that is clean, without any like chips or anything, and is wet, you will not scratch your glass. If you're like gouging the edge corner of it, maybe you will. But like if it's flat along the glass, you know, you have a nice flat, nice clean blade and it's wet, you're not gonna scratch your glass. Same thing goes with like the flipper, which I use, or I know the tunes from those other ones. You have a much higher likelihood of scratching your glass with the scrubby side. If you have the scrubby side and a piece of sand gets caught between it, it is sandwiching that piece of sand against the glass, and that is going to scratch it. If you're doing it this way with the blade, the only thing touching my glass is those two little white nubs and that little razor blade. So there is not really a chance of anything scratching it. Now, if you look at the edge of the blades, they're rounded too. They don't even have a point, so you're even safer. But having only those two nubs and the blade touching means it's much harder for something to get caught in the middle. Now, the one thing that you would have to watch out for is if a snail or something was on the side of this, or like a string of stars, if you had something hard with a crustacean type of creature on here, then that could sandwich between and risk scratching it, right? But in general, you don't have to worry about sand or other stuff scratching it because you have this gap between it. And then that's actually, yeah, so you can kind of see that like gap in the middle. So I only use the razor blade on my tank because I feel it's much safer and less likely about getting a scratch, and I'm super OCD about scratches. Red Sea Forever, I use a plastic razors. Plastic as well. Now this is on glass. Do not use a metal blade on acrylic. If you're using acrylic, you know, use like a gift card or something and do it that way. Like, you know, loyalty card, whatever, any of these, credit card. That's what I would use if you're on acrylic. MJOSRS. Is Red Sea 3 ratio of each? I'm not sure how new to it. Thanks from the UK. I have no idea what you're asking. Ask that one again. Miguel M. What do you prefer, the flipper metallic blade or a razor blade? The flipper lives on my tank as the everyday one. I have the normal size one on my frag tank, which is whatever this is, the normal size, and then I have the max on the water box, like the big boy. And that is my daily one. That's my daily go clean the glass, usually every day or two. And then the razor blade I will use for like a deep cleaning, maybe like once a month, just because there's always like little bits near the edges, or there's like extra little dots of stuff that grow, and the flipper doesn't have enough juice to get it. Now, and I find a lot of that's the angle of the blade. So if this is cleaning the glass, like it will get all the easy stuff, but if it's really deep, sometimes you need like more of an aggressive angle. So I'll either just take my hand and go and clean it myself that way using the flipper, or then I'll use this once in a while if I don't want to get my hands as wet and then get down by the sand bed and get those little hard to reach places. So I'm gonna say it depends, but I just use the flipper razor blade like 95% of the time. It's kind of the general go-to. I'm assuming you're talking about dosing though with like the Red Sea AB, and I don't know if they have a C, maybe they do. But generally, most systems advise you to dose equal parts for everything. So usually if you're dosing, 5 mil of this, you dose 5 mil of that. There is some situations where I find in my tanks, I've always had to dose a little more elk than calcium. So, if I'm dosing, 10 mils of each, maybe my elk is 12 mils, but I've always found I've had to dose a little bit more. And that was with DIY, it was with the Red Sea, it was with ESV. Like, it was like a common trend to dose that extra bit of elk on there. Clyde, anyone else use Mr. Clean magic erasers? I sure have, and they work very well. So Mr. Clean magic erasers, as long as they're original, you can get those guys, and they work very well for cleaning stuff. I used to have curved glass aquarium back in my freshwater days. It was like a fluval, something to do with the forest. What was it? Anyways, one of the fluval ones, Osaka. It was a bent glass tank. That was really cool, but the corners are pain to clean. So again, magic eraser, magic. Same with the Innovative Marine Nouveau Fusion. That's what it was. It had the bent glass, and same thing. The magic eraser was like magic for cleaning. That worked very well. You could probably use it on acrylic, I would imagine. But glass, for sure, it works well. Now you can also buy like no-name magic clean erasers off like Amazon or somewhere for super cheap. I think they're called like melamine sponges or something like that, but they're like super duper cheap on there, and just basic ones. But if you buy them, make sure it's original Mr. Clean or the melamine sponges, whatever they are, and no chemicals, no additives, just like the raw like porous sponge material. MJB Horus, it's the Red Sea calcium mag, 3 of each, because they told me there are 3 ratios of each. When I'm dosing 4 mils of elk, I should dose 1.3 mils of calcium, and not sure on the others. Honestly, get a test kit, test calcium elk and mag, and keep it stable. If your numbers are stable, keep your dose as it is. If your calcium's dropping, dose a little more. If your mag is raising, dose a little less. So like, whatever the instructions are, every tank is different. They generally give you like a basis of instructions. This is like the average way of doing it. But if you can tweak it, you might have to tweak it for your specific tank. So, and the only way to know for sure is to test, and then just tweak a little bit if you need to. Fellow reefer, magic erasers are awesome in acrylic tanks. There you go. That is the magic. I've only used like an old credit card so far on my acrylic sum, and this worked well. I thought about the Mr. Clean erasers many times, so awesome. Homegrown frags, use the magic eraser on my acrylic frag tank so it doesn't scratch. Beautiful. Yeah, so at the end of the day, test your tank, and that's the only way you're going to 100% know for sure. Do you have to dose? I have a nano, and doing daily water change seems to be doing good. You can do that as well. Again, like we just mentioned, it comes down to testing. I generally say, I always focus on elk, since alkalinity swings the most. If you have more than about a 0.5 swing in a week, then I would start looking at dosing. If you're, if you're hitting a 1 DHK swing in a week, to me that seems kind of large, and I would say, okay, you should start dosing. So if you're doing daily water changes, that works too. If they're automated, beautiful. You're probably set, you're probably good to go. Now, on a nano tank, it's pretty easy to do. If you have a big tank, it gets more and more expensive to do tons of salt, so that's kind of where you got to take that in consideration. Austin, hope you're having a good week. So far, so good. Thank you. But yeah, like on my old Red Sea now, it was 20-gallon tank. I did dose. I had the doser. I had the EK Coral doser, and I was only dosing like 3 or 4 mils a day. It was super low. And then I did a 5-gallon bucket a week water change. So that's like 4 to 5 gallons. So it's like 20-25% a week. Tank thrived. It was the easiest tank I've ever had. So water changes, lots of people are against them for whatever reason, but they work well. So good consideration. Started dosing my nano tank to extend water changes. But yeah, okay. So if you're doing water changes, you're doing it to add something or take away something. So you're adding, your big 3 elements and your trace elements, or you're doing it to remove nutrients or contaminants or something else. If you are taking and adding away those things on your own, do you really need water changes? Maybe not. Now, I still think they're good once in a while, even for the people that are against them, because over time, certain things will build up. Whatever you add into your tank probably has some contaminants. It probably has some other stuff. And it probably is not an issue short term, but you know, after a year or two of dosing something with a contaminant, that teeny little bit may eventually add up to something that could cause trouble. Or if you do water change once in a while, it helps dilute it. You know, dilution's the solution of pollution, right? So then it will minimize any long-term effects. So this is something to consider. Did you buy your generator yet? I have not. They're expensive. One day, and I think I missed the sale, so I don't know. One day I will. But I do have a decent battery backup on my tank. On the water box, I think they're two 18 amp hour batteries. So it's 36 amp hours worth of battery backup that are hooked up to the two MP60s. And then on the frag tank, I have the legit Ecotech battery backup, which is hooked up to 2 of the 4 MP40s. So I do have battery backup, and I don't really get power outages here very often. If I do, they're generally short or an hour or two, so at least the flow would be going to be good. It's been a long time since I've had one that's lasted more than like 5 or 6 hours. So, but eventually I'll get one. But it's like, you know, $600, $800, $900, so it's not cheap. So one day. David G, I want to get a new skimmer. I'm not so happy with my Simplicity skimmer anymore. I have not heard of the Simplicity skimmer, but if it works, it works. There's a bazillion skimmers out there. Depends on the size of your tank. I have the NIOS brand ones, which I've been very happy with. It would be nice if they had a DC pump, would be my only mini complaint, because they'd be more power efficient. But they are somehow pretty darn quiet for an AC skimmer. So overall, they're very quiet and solid quality. Not the cheapest, but they're awesome skimmers. We can all hook up to Than's 3-phase generator. No kidding, eh? It's need a really long extension cord. But yeah, decent skimmer makes a big difference. Like, I know tons of tanks just have like a really beefy skimmer, and that's it. They don't have refugiums, they don't have other stuff, and it does the job. So it can work. And I probably have too much equipment on my tank and too much gear, and I'm sure most of us do. You can keep things super simple, or you can overcomplicate it. Part of my thing, I geek out on all the equipment, so I like it. I'm equipment junkie. I work in IT, I work in tech, so I like all the tech stuff. It's kind of like a hobby within the hobby for me. I heard NASA's very good. It is pretty solid. Like, they're very well made, so I've been very happy with them. And I had the 160 on my old tank, which is now on my frag tank, and I got the 220, which is like the bigger guy, and that's my water box. And Mark, since you're in the chat, I believe you have the even bigger one, just like the 300, which is the really big beast on yours. Aussie Dan, have I used Vibrant? Any negative experiences? I have used it. Told the answer to this one earlier, so you joined late. But I used it to get rid of bulb algae in my nano tank a few years back, and it did the job. Reef Octo is solid for the price. I've heard actually a lot of good things about Reef Octopus. My buddy has one, and he's really happy with it. And he recently got, I think actually has their calcium reactor and calc reactor on his tank. So he has a good chunk of the Reef Octopus family. But yeah, from what I've seen, they're well made and they're pretty solid. Speaking of tech and tech junkies, Parker's Reef is a guest. I'll have to get him on sometime. Maybe I shall in the near future. Alright guys, we are almost at 2 hours, an hour and 48, so I think I'm going to call her pretty quick unless there's any last minute questions. But first, I want to give a huge shout out to the super chatters. Thank you very much, Reggie, John, Rob, Battle OCR, Tracy, John, and Brett Miller. Thank you guys, much appreciated. And for those of you who are watching, if you guys enjoyed it, hit that like button. It makes the YouTubes happy, so always appreciated if you're enjoying it. Where do I like my phosphate levels and how do you control it? I like my phosphate levels less than 0.09. 0.03 to 0.06 is kind of a happier range. Currently they're a little higher, but I mainly control it using GFO, and I use GFO to pull it down if it gets too high. David G, do you have your NIOS plumbed to outside air? I have the NIOS 220 on my water box plumbed to outside air. Now I have a lot of fish in the tank, as you can see behind me. And that one, I'm in the middle of the house, so I didn't have any options to an outside wall, so I actually went straight up through the wall behind it into the attic, and I have it pulling from the attic, which is basically fresh air, so. So that one I definitely do. And it definitely made an improvement, so that helps. Curve Elite skimmers are beasts as well. I haven't actually heard of those ones or used those ones yet. Alright, my throat is super dry. So, I'm going to call her. But hopefully you guys enjoyed today's live stream. If you did, hit that like button. Thank you guys so much for the super chats. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it and learned something. If you're new, make sure you subscribe. If you don't want to miss another one, hit that bell button, because apparently a few people said they don't get the notification, so hit that bell. Thank you guys.